Hi, welcome to the newest episode of Sports Talk Central. I'm your host, Adeep Mahmood, with my normal co-host Hunter. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about Ravens and Steelers, and then we're going to be talking a little bit about the Virginia Tech National Signing Day and what it could mean for next year's team, before finishing up with a discussion on the Mets. So let's just talk Ravens and Steelers. Ravens lost to the Browns. Obviously, that was a tough. That was like unlucky. Like you could tell the Ravens were going to lose when Tucker missed the field. There's a stat when Tucker misses the field goal, the Ravens lose a ton of games, but it's so rare. But it's like when Tucker misses two field goals, the Ravens their win loss record is not, it's heavily on the loss. Um,
Mhm.
but it definitely there was some they had like five turnovers, like two turnover on downs type of situations. Demarcus Robinson, I don't know how often you watch Demarcus Robinson play, but he does this thing where when he catches the ball, this annoys me. He doesn't run like this. He kind of runs like this, and so when he runs, he kind of like holds out the ball like this, so anyone can just knock it out. It's an annoying tendency that it's an annoying tendency that he has, and there was a fumble for it. There's another fumble. So it was like a comedy of errors that led to them because of all those drives. I mean, not as bad as the Buccaneers with five straight drives resulting in turnovers, but yeah, it was definitely a game that they beat themselves in. Um, I know a lot of people are on Greg Roman's butt about whether he should still have his job. I'm Am I frustrated with him? Sure. I mean, how can you have J.K. Dobbins who averages 10 yards per carry, Gus Edwards who averages 7.6, and they had a combined total of one carry in the fourth quarter in a close game. And you're a run game coordinator, so there's stuff like that that frustrates me. He does get a little Jekyll and Hyde. Like I'll be fair, let me start with what I don't like about him. He has the Jekyll and Hyde tendencies where he'll run the ball, get into the red zone, and then he'll just throw the ball. I'm not a big fan of that stuff. That being said, obviously we're going to talk about the Steelers, but I do want to address this whole thing of like with Roman's job security. They're in a playoff race. You have T. Barton, who has 1 year of experience at USC, and you got James Urban, who has no experience as an offensive coordinator. You are in a playoff race right now. Do you really think Greg Roman, who is your most experienced play caller, right now, you're going to fire Greg Roman with 2-3 games left in this situation, and you either going to have one guy who has 1 year of experience but has been a receiver coach mainly, and another guy who has had a lot of experience with the Ravens and other teams as well, but he has no OC experience. It's basically sometimes you got to think logically, not emotionally. So like I don't think the timing is there. Let's get to the next part. If Greg Roman were to be fired at the end of the season, which I think he will be, I think John, Eric, Ozzie, and Steve Bisciotti all know it. Do you really think John Harbaugh is going to go on in a press conference and say Greg Roman is going to be fired at the end of the season? What good does that do for anyone? Because Greg Roman can say, okay, screw it, I'm going to be looking for a job anyway. Why would I care? The other thing is the other thing is if you have candidates in mind, you don't want to give them leverage. So I don't know what fans were talking. I don't understand why fans want Harbaugh to say whether Roman's fired or not because it doesn't make too much sense, even though I don't like him. And here's the other thing, though. The thing about Roman being fired, the easiest way to lose your job is to metaphorically undress someone in a press conference. Like I'm pretty sure Mike Tomlin has issues with Matt Canada, but Mike Tomlin is also a good enough coach to keep those issues behind closed doors. So at the end of the day, what do you expect Harbaugh to say, right? And then obviously he's going to talk with the fans, right? So it was pretty interesting to see what happens. Tyler Huntley's going to start today. Uh, Run the ball. That's all I'm going to say. What are your thoughts on the Steelers?
Well, I'm obviously bummed about. It's very cold outside, so I am part of the Sickos committee that is going to be going to this game tonight. Yep, I am. Will I stay for a quarter? Yeah. Will I stay for 2 quarters? Hopefully. Will I stay for 3 quarters? Probably not. The forecast is calling for like 0 degrees, -20 wind chills. This stinks. My car has barely been able to start outside. I can barely even go up the front of my driveway because I don't have all-wheel drive, which is very unfortunate. But obviously they'll be playing with, in all seriousness, they'll be playing with heavy hearts because of Franco Harris's sudden passing. They haven't really announced what it was. If I had to guess, it was a heart attack or something like that, because he seemed to be in perfect health when I talked to him, Adita, like almost 2 weeks ago. It was about 12 days ago when I talked to him. Nothing seemed to be wrong. Looked in perfect health, physically, mentally, at least, talking wise. So it's a big game for that reason, but it's also a big game because their playoff hopes are still kind of alive. If they win this game, they get to 7-8. The Jets keep losing. The Patriots, if they lose, that helps out as well. But I'm not really looking at it like that because that would be like a total sicko. But the Steelers are still playing for that faint playoff hope, and they're still playing to hopefully finish above 500 because I think that streak means a lot to Mike Tomlin and the players. But they're coming off a 24-16 win against the Panthers. They swept the NFC South, which is not really an accomplishment because that division sucks. But they pounded the rock against the Panthers. I would assume that they're going to do that again tonight, especially when it's going to be this cold. And, I would probably take the over under 30 passes, probably go well under on that. I think the big thing, they got to stop Devontae Adams. He's awesome. Derek Carr, I don't really think is that good. Hunter Renfrow, though, he's also good. So the Raiders, despite them not being good this season, they still have playmakers. They had that hilarious win last week where the Patriots just totally vomited all over themselves on the final play.
They were literally going backwards. Instead of going forward, they literally went backwards.
And then the Patriot announcer was like, "This might be the dumbest team I've ever seen." It's like, wow, you don't think you'd say that under a Bill Belichick coach team, did you? But
and they had Rob Gronkowski play safety against the Dolphins a few years ago.
That was also very stupid. It's just, this is going to be a smash mouth kind of football game. It's going to be cold. It's going to be windy. There's no snow in the forecast, but it's a big one. They can keep their playoff hopes alive. Well, potentially, they're playing for Franco. That halftime ceremony, I think, is going to be very emotional. Kenny Pickett is returning for this game, so that's big. They're not going to have to rely on Trubisky to just be a game manager, though he did play fine, I think, against the Panthers. But I'm really looking forward to seeing them run the ball in this one. Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, I think, are a really good duo. I'm not ready to say they're like one of the 5 best duos in the league, but I think they're, potentially up there in the top 10 because Warren has been really good this season. I don't think enough people are talking about it right now. Defensively, they played much better last week against the Panthers team that does run smash mouth football. They only allowed 21 rushing yards a week after allowing over 200 to the Ravens. They knew what they did wrong. They did well with this one. And, the Raiders, who do they have? Josh Jacobs, one of the most premier, best running backs in the league. So they're going to have to really tune into that, because if they can stop him, you force Derek Carr to beat you down the field in conditions that aren't really that good. I think that benefits the Steelers, even though, they've been prone to giving up some big plays in the passing game. But, it was big for them to get the win last week. It was a game that I don't really think was that close, even though it was an 8-point game. And I think this game, they should be favored. I think they can and will win this game. It's just all a matter of, can the offense, the biggest thing for me with them, can they just not be stupid? In games this season, when they've not turned the ball over, they're undefeated. But when they've turned the ball over, they're like, I believe the record's like 1-7 or something like that. There you go. The defense, they will give the Steelers an opportunity to win every single week. Is that unit as good as it could be or as good as it should be? Probably not. But you're doing something right if you're holding most of the opposition to below 20 points a game. It's all a matter of, can the offense just not be stupid and just get out of its own ways so that they can support the defense a little bit. That's what I'm going to be looking for, in this game.
Yeah, so just a quick note on the playoff thing I forgot to mention with the Ravens. The Ravens they can clinch a playoff spot this week if they beat the Falcons, and because the Jaguars beat the Jets, if either the Patriots or the Dolphins lose, the Ravens win, the Ravens will clinch a playoff spot. So it is going to be a little tricky for the Steelers. If the Ravens win, the Steelers making the playoffs, I think the odds go very limited because at worst the Ravens would have 7 losses, the Steelers already have 8. So it's going to be very difficult for this. There's obviously still a path for them, but it would be very difficult because you have those 4 teams that have 7 losses, so it's gonna be really interesting there. But yeah. So and then the rest of the NFL, I mean, we talked about the Patriots thing, that was bad. We talked about that was comical. But it was also, and then the Bengals and Buccaneers. I think I texted you this. This is a really weird comparison, but you have 2 famous athletes or actors who are named Tom, and I don't know if you saw the commercial in the first quarter. You had 60-year-old Tom Cruise go off a plane, calmly thanking the audience for watching Top Gun 2 and promoting Mission Impossible. Like, by the way, like, he's high up in the plane, and he's like this, like, no panic, just promote and all that stuff. That commercial happened, and clearly Tom Cruise is in the best part of his career. Then you saw the second half of the Buccaneers game, and you saw Tom Brady do what he did. I just want to point out that interesting juxtaposition of Tom Cruise doing that at 60, and then Tom Brady not helping his that Buccaneers offense, and Tom Brady not playing well in the second half. So it is interesting. It is also really interesting on that one. But you're right. Like, I think the Steelers should win this game because of what you just said. I mean, you have the run game. Like, it is cold as heck, and I wouldn't be shocked if some of these players had literal balls by the end of the
This is Green Bay weather, dude. I mean, I'm gonna be wearing double socks tonight, foot warmers for my shoes, probably a short sleeve shirt, a long sleeve shirt, a sweatshirt, maybe a North Face, and then maybe I'm probably gonna have 5 or 6 layers on, and I'm probably gonna have something over my face, and I'm gonna have gloves on. I don't even know how I'm gonna survive a half of this game. And guess how much tickets are going for right now on StubHub?
13 or 10 or something like that.
Actually, it's about $10.
Wow. Yeah, no, and it was interesting because there's a lot of Ravens fans that are saying, well, the Ravens tickets were going under $7 or $10. Look at the it's like it's an indictment on teams. Like, no, it's Christmas Eve. It's cold as heck. Like I said,
Yeah.
these players might have blue balls, and you're
Oh,
going
I can't wait for some of these players to wear short sleeves outside in this game. You monsters.
Oh, there are gonna be players that are gonna be shirtless. I don't understand it, but
Ryan Shazier used to do that. God rest, yeah. God bless him.
All right, so we're going to talk about the next topic, which is Virginia Tech National Signing Day. They just signed 25 players. What were your thoughts on some of these players, some of the transfers, and what they could do, what it means for next year's team?
I mean, I really like this class. They had some nice flips over the last couple of weeks.
The D end was good. The D end was good.
Yes, no, for sure. I mean, they got that wide receiver from Norfolk State. They got that defensive end from Temple, and obviously Drones. That's what a pickup that is from a former 4-star quarterback. I think he's going to beat out Grant Wells this year. I think Grant Wells stands a chance. At least that's how I see it. It stinks that they couldn't get Tony Grimes. It sounds like, I think a couple guys said that they offered him a really big NIL deal, playing time for 2 years to get him to the NFL draft, but I think he just wanted to go to A&M. Whatever. I don't really think A&M is a good program right now under Jimbo Fisher, but that's his decision. But I'm glad that they did try. But a couple of nice flips in the class. Pop Watson was another one. They got Aiden Green from Tennessee. I think he's the number 1 player in the state down there. This is a solid building blocks class. You're not going to get these 4 and 5 stars overnight, but 2024 is, I think, when they're really going to get going and try to get some of those top 10 players in the state, because they were so far behind coming into this class because Justin Fuente really nuked the recruiting in the state of Virginia, where they couldn't catch up to some of the blue bloods that had some of these top players. But now that Brent Pry has at least a full year under his belt, they can really go to town for 2024 and try to get some of those top 10 players to stay home. But I really like this class. I think there's a lot of versatility to it. And then transfer wise, I don't think they're done adding. I think they said they want another offensive tackle, a cornerback, a running back. So Overall, I think this was a solid class. I think it was almost top 30 per 247 Sports. Really impressed with it.
Yeah, and I think the big thing here is they weren't happy with the offense last year. Maybe they were trying to run a certain type of offense that didn't quite work out. They tried to change it, and then it was clear with some of the especially with some of the transfers, that with some of these that they wanted to run a different type of offense, and maybe they were tailoring some of the flips and transfers to that. I think you might see more of it. A bigger indication is going to be next year. I mean, yeah, you're right. I think Drones is going to beat out Grant Wells, and maybe Drones and Pop Watson and those guys, the quarterbacks they got fit this offense more. But the other thing I like is we actually have like when Caleb Smith left, and by the way, Caleb Smith is uh, committed to Notre Dame, so that's going to be interesting for him what he does there. It definitely puts his NFL draft stock up even higher. But they got some veterans like Ali Jennings. Thank goodness for Fontel Mines. He really good recruiter, a really good recruiting coach, and him and Rudolph. But Fontel Mines out of Old Dominion, that's going to help. The Felton from Norfolk State, that's going to help as well. But now you actually have depth. Like you actually have legitimate depth there at the receiver position, and you got size. Like between Daquan Wright, Felton, and Jennings, you got your two outside guys. Felton can Wright can play in the slot, and he can kind of be that the tight end since Dalton Keene and all those Hodges, what those guys have done. And then you still have Tucker Holloway. You got Holloway. You still got Dewan Lofton. So I like this receiving room that they have right now. Obviously, it's not the marquee names, but like you said, this team needed a rebuild, and if we're going to be honest, in year two of a rebuild, this is probably a pretty good receiving core. So again, I think it's going to depend a lot on the run game, but I'm going to be really disappointed if we are completely bad in the red zone because, like I said, we got the size. If we're going to do the RPO, if we're going to do those types of run schemes, we got the players. We should be more productive, especially in the ACC. So this team, it is going to be interesting what they do. And you're right, it is going to next year's class is going to be should be better. Now, what were your thoughts? Like, I thought it was pretty cool the way they kind of were announcing the picks as if it was an NFL draft. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And do you think that this will help in the future? You're mute. You're muted. You're muted.
I keep doing that, man. This is so annoying. No, like I thought it was really nice to be honest with you. It's I think it's a sign that things are changing within the program because with Justin Fuente, they never even thought about doing anything like that. I think Brent Pry even credited the director of was it the general manager of the program or
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it was
something like that. It was something they
the
did in Vanderbilt with Franklin. It was a start they did there.
that makes sense. Yeah, he credited I think the general manager of the program, Mike Negra
Really,
or something like that. Negra, whatever his last name is.
right.
He said Brent Price said he put it together, and that was awesome. You get to see like like who's committing, and it was like a whole ceremony and stuff. And I want to see them keep doing it. I do think that that could potentially help. With getting some more recruits here. It certainly can't hurt, but I think it shows that they take it a lot more seriously than the other staff did, and I'm really excited about it. I thought they were doing a really solid job with it.
And you could definitely tell based on like the differences between the staff because it feels like with Fuente and then with that staff, it just felt like very buttoned up. It's like it felt very corporate. And with Brent Pry, I mean Brent Pry definitely feels like a guy that you could go to like a bar with, and then the coaching staff kind of feels that way, and you could definitely tell um, with the way that they approach the national signing day in the draft it is definitely interesting seeing the juxtaposition of the two coaching staff. So I think we are headed in the right direction with it. So we'll see what they do next year. But also, on bad news on the basketball front, Hunter Couture is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh,
So
that was it a broken arm, did
I'll check yeah, I think he's gonna be yeah. So his recovery time is 6 to 8 weeks. That's just a new rumor on 247. So it's gonna suck not having him there. But as long as he comes back towards the end of the season, he should be we should be good to go.
I will say it's bad that he's going to miss the next 6 to 8 weeks, but also I think Rodney Rice is just about ready, if I recall correctly. I think they think he's going to be ready for the Wake Forest game, which is next weekend, if I recall correctly. So they're hoping that he should be good for that. So it's annoying that it's, like Thanos, a soul for a soul, but Rice's addition to back to the lineup should really help just overall. But Couture is being out is massive because he's their best. I think he's their best 3-point shooter. He's great anywhere on the court. That was a tough injury, and after just a really tough game overall. I don't know why they struggle so much against Boston College. I don't know what it is. I don't think Mike Young has ever beaten BC. I think that's the only ACC team he's never beaten yet. They looked like they were going to steal that game with less than a minute left. They go up 59-57, but then they allowed BC to come down and tie it. And then that possession with Padula, I probably would have called timeout there, but that's just me. But I really hope that Couture is able to come back soon, and I hope that the team is still in tournament contention by then. But right now, I think Joe Lunardi has them as a 6th seed.
All right, so we're gonna talk a little bit about the Mets later, but so in the winter meeting, so some other moves were made. We're gonna talk a little bit the Mets, the Giants as well, but I mean, I don't think the Nationals. I know the Nationals went out, got Trevor Williams. They may have gotten a few others, but let's talk a little bit Orioles Nationals before we go to Mets. Orioles went ahead and signed Adam Frazier, basically super utility type, everyday utility type, can play second to a 1-year, $8 million deal. This is a guy that has a career 273 batting average, really good on base. Basically, those pesky hitters at the end of the lineup that they won't hit for home runs, but they'll just slap the ball all over the place. That's what Adam Frazier is. That's what they're bringing him in to be. He's an improvement over Odor. They then went out and brought back an old friend in Michael Givens. He's probably going to be another their 4th back end guy. Good numbers. Good swing and miss rate. Definitely a good veteran guy to have. I do wonder if maybe the Orioles bringing back a Zach Britton, who's free agent, or Brad Brock or Darren O'Day, and bring back some of the old crew. And then they went out and traded for James McCann from the Mets. The Mets are paying $19 million out of the remaining 24, so it's basically 2.5 over the next 2 years. Again, another improvement. Basically, he's improvement over Torinos. He is a backup catcher. It was really hilarious seeing the Orioles fans kind of complain about bringing in a backup catcher. I'm not kidding. He is a backup catcher. Rutschman's job is safe. Like, this is a guy that but he can also DH. He can also play first base. This is a guy that was a All-Star in 2019, and maybe and I don't know if it was the New York media, because if you remember right, the Mets were in on JT Realmuto, but this was the offseason where it was Realmuto, Springer, and a few other pieces. So they decided to go with James McCann on a 4-year, $40 million deal instead of paying Realmuto the amount of money they have. And maybe the Mets fans, maybe it's because they didn't get Springer, they didn't get Trevor Bauer. We're not going to talk about Trevor Bauer, but he was a free agent. But my point is, they didn't get those guys, and they ended up with McCann. So maybe they had higher expectations, but he's a good piece to have. He's a good, solid backup catcher. But the theme of the Orioles' offseason moves are these incremental improvements. Like, Kyle Gibson is an improvement over Jordan Lyles, who, by the way, got 2 years, $17 million. I don't know how, but he got 2 years, $17 million. But you got Lyles. No, it's Gibson over Lyles. Then they went out and got Frazier, who's an improvement over Odor. You got Givens, who's going to be an improvement over Joey Crable, who might be in a lower, less stressful role in the bullpen, and then McCann over Trina. So they're doing the right things here because this is a team that improved by 31 games. You do not want to just make these big, massive moves just because you had a 31-game improvement, because even the front office was surprised. So you do have to show restraint. Next offseason, I think they're going to make bigger moves. And then there are rumors about Jorge Mateo getting traded potentially, which makes sense because with the 4 shortstops off the market, you look at a guy like him, he is valuable, but at the same time, and I look, he's super exciting. Great defense, good speed. We're probably better at hitting than he is. 221 batting average, 270 on base percentage. You can't steal first base. His walk rate isn't great. Like his walk rate was like 7%, but his strikeout rate was 27%. Like so there's stuff about his game that I'm not a fan of offensively. So if a team like the Braves or the Dodgers were willing to put in a young pitcher and they want Mateo, all right, cool. Mateo, go have fun there. We'll put Gunnar Henderson at short. We have a lot of middle infielders, so it is going to be interesting. I do anticipate them making a trade. Maybe not now. Maybe until mid-season. But I mean, that's just the main updates on the Orioles. The Nationals do anything, or should we move on to the Mets?
They haven't really done too much, to be honest. I mean, they're not gonna really do much this offseason.
All right, so let's move on to the Mets. Basically, I'm not going to share a screen, but so the Mets opening day lineup.
The Mets just Steve Cohen has a lot of money.
Here's the Mets opening day lineup in 2020. Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso, Michael Conforto, Yoenis Cespedes, Robinson Cano, J.D. Davis, Wilson Ramos, Ahmed Rosario.
So yeah, how many of those guys are still there today?
Brandon Nimmo, Carlos Correa, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, Starling Marte, Daniel Vogelbach, Mark Hanna, Omar Narvaez.
Stop. How much money is that in the lineup?
Over 300. A lot of money.
It's a lot. And then you don't then you don't account for their pitching staff with Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer,
Kodai Senga.
Yep. And then the relief pitchers, Edwin Diaz.
Yep. Ottavino.
David Robertson.
Ottavino.
Yep.
And apparently they're trying to trade for Liam
Hendricks. Is this like a $500 million payroll?
With taxes, yes.
I'm sorry. If they don't win at least a playoff round next season, I will laugh at them forever. I mean, they already are a meme because they're second fiddle to the Yankees in New York. If you don't win a playoff series next year or for a while, I will laugh at you until the rest of your days. You
want me to give you a prediction? First of all, they're trying to trade for Liam Hendricks as well from the White Sox. So that'll make that bullpen even filthier. I'll give you a prediction here. I think Steve Cohen just wants a World Series so bad, and you're not going to like this as a Nats fan, but it's interesting. Francisco Alvarez is untouchable for them. He's the number one prospect in baseball. Other than that, they got Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, and a few other top 30 prospects. I think the Mets are going to consider making a trade this offseason because we know that the Angels aren't going to be good. I think, and you're not going to like this, I think the Mets are going to trade some of those top 100 prospects not named Francisco Alvarez to the Angels for Shohei Ohtani.
All right, that's too far. Shut up.
Yeah, I would not be shocked. And apparently people are saying, like, it will be a shocker if he doesn't end up in New York. And, yeah, like...
Just stop.
Yeah,
you've said enough for me here.
Yeah, so before we get to the Giants part of this equation with Correa, do you think what Steve Cohen is doing is good for baseball or bad for baseball?
That's a tough question. I see pros and cons to it. If you have money, spend it by all means. You're trying to get a World Series ring. You're doing the exact opposite of what the Wilpon family did, which is they didn't spend their money. I just think there's two big extremes. Why don't you just meet in the middle? I think as well. But obviously the con is, some of these other teams can't spend like that. And I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, like the Pirates, that's just a different story. They could easily spend more if they wanted to, or the Oakland Athletics with Billy Beane, they could easily spend more if they wanted to as well. Or
The
the Tampa.
Orioles, the Angelos family, by the way, I think can gets should not be considered with those groups because, long story short, there's a dispute with the law firm, and because one douchey brother it decided to do this, try to put his thumb too much, that percentage of that money is unavailable to be used, and now the two brothers are suing each other. So the Angelos family can't really spend too much, so the Orioles should not be considered in that group. But yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, I get that, and I think the Lerner family should not be in there for the most part because they've actually have spent their money. It's just their trouble's been with extensions for some of their top players, which is a very real problem. But they're not going to be owning the team for much longer. Yeah. So again, like even a team like like the A's or the Pirates, but they're also like very low on the totem pole. Even the Tampa Bay Rays, but they also spend a little bit, and they're still one of the top teams in the AL every year just because of their development. Even the Guardians, almost the Indians, again, the Guardians, they're a low payroll team, but they still get the job done. So, low payroll teams can still win. It's just that, I don't think it's fair that a team can also spend 500 million and not really have any repercussions for it except a luxury tax. I mean, and an owner can pay that pretty easily. Steve Cohen's one of the richest people in the world. So again, there's pros and cons to it. I still think there should be a salary cap. That's my take, though. I mean, I think every other sport has one. Well, yeah, I mean, they do have one. Baseball, I think, should be up there too. I think it should be like a high salary cap, but I think like this right here with what the Mets have done, this would be like in my ideal world over the cap. They wouldn't have been able to do this if this was a cap world.
So you're
But
saying like 370? You're saying something like 370 million as a salary
yeah,
cap?
I think that's fine. I think 500 is just way too much. Like you're basically almost fielding like what is this, D? What we the Golden State Warriors of baseball right now? Like I feel like that's just like too much for me. And the Warriors, they took advantage of the NBA salaries cap because it kept going up, right? You could have KD and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and all these other guys on there. That's why they won all those championships. But that obviously led to a player leaving and blah 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 because the NBA is a lot different than the MLB. But with baseball, this basically is the version of the Warriors, but I just don't think it should be like that because there should be a hard cap. 500 is just too much.
Yeah, so and I agree. I think I will say this. I think this is ultimately good for baseball for Steve Cohen. One, Steve Cohen's is one out of one. He is one of the richest people in baseball. There's not a lot of people that have his money, but if he starts spending money, it will start encouraging a few other owners to spend money, and we're starting to see that with the Padres, with the Yankees as well to a degree. But and so I think it does. There's you should spend more money, and that there's another aspect there. But here's the thing: Steve Cohen, for being a one-on-one, and for what the Mets are doing, he is on the complete one end of the scale. He is if you have limitless money, go and spend it. But you're like it's like what you said. If this team, the expectations for this team are sky high. They're sky high, especially even because of what I just said, like what I just said 5 minutes ago, who else they could add. But my point being is, if they don't get, a World Series trophy or World Series title, on the next CBA meetings, owners are the owners now have a perfect argument to use against the players. They got the perfect argument to use. It's like, all right, you want free spending? Okay, great. Well, see, look what the Mets. Okay, the Mets did what you were doing, and they didn't win. So I don't know if it's going to lead to a salary cap, but there is this notion right now because we haven't had an owner like we haven't had a Steve Cohen, and ever since George Steinbrenner, we have not had someone like Steve Cohen. We now have someone who is spending so much money, and that the Players Association and Scott Boras and some of these agents really like Steve Cohen. But while Steve Cohen might be their best friend now, he might be their worst enemy later because if the Mets don't win, which is very possible, because baseball, when it comes to luck, like for example, the Orioles and the Tigers in 2014, the Orioles played the Tigers. The Orioles didn't have notable names. They beat Scherzer, Price, and Verlander and swept the Tigers. So flukish things could happen. The Royals, they had that nice 2-year run. Things could happen, and if the Mets don't are not successful, if they don't win World Series, Steve Cohen's going to go from the best friend of the PA to their worst nightmare. And right now, he's already pissed off every other owner. So right now, if the Mets don't win, he has a lot riding on this. If the Mets don't win, and he's already pissed off the remaining owners, the MLBPA is going to go against him, and the agents are going to go against him. So
I hope that happens.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I do kind of. It is unfortunate because Buck Shoals, I am a Buck Shoals guy. I do want to see him be successful, but at the same time, I don't think. But I want to see Steve Cohen fail because I know that Steve Cohen is going to spend more and more and more and more money, and the more money he puts on his team, the more expectations he has, and so I agree with you. Teams should spend more money, but people who are criticizing some of these teams that aren't spending money have to understand they're not Steve Cohen. They're not these rich. They're not these rich owners like the Cincinnati Reds. Their principal owner is worth 400 million. Like that's so they're a completely different situation. So it is going to be interesting. It is going to be interesting there. All right, so this is, and then we'll end one with this last topic with the Giants. Uh, they missed out on Aaron Judge. They tried to get Arson Judge.
You going?
They tried to go get Carlos Correa, which is also really weird because they got Correa, they had the physical, then they found something wrong with the physical, and then they went ahead and said, well, okay, it's fine. Which maybe it was cold feet, maybe they didn't really, maybe they were so focused on spending money on Aaron Judge when that didn't happen that they had to spend money on someone, and it wasn't going to be on. They didn't get Rodon, they didn't get any of the other shortstops, and then they had to spend money on Correa at that point. Maybe the physical didn't work. Maybe they saw something in the physical that gave them a way out. Now, your argument gets bleaker when you went ahead and signed Mitch Haniger, who had injury issues. When you signed Michael Conforto, who had who missed last season because of an injury. So those guys can pass your physical, but Carlos Correa can't pass your physical. So there is something fishy there. So what were your thoughts on that whole debate, whole Giants debacle, and where you think how
They also did try to get Trey Turner. I'm pretty sure, right? I think they did.
Padres. No,
I thought the Giants went on that too, but yeah, I mean, remember what they said? Oh, we're talking a big game. We're going to go out there and sign someone. We're going to spend some money. Well, did they spend money?
No. I mean, they got Sean Manaea, but he's fine, but not big money.
Yeah.
Ross Stripling,
yeah, he's fine, but it's just, my point is just that they talked this huge game. They were going to go out there, make the team better. We're going to spend some money, even though that's not like our big MO as an organization. And they failed so far, at least. They got the Correa one done, but then they found something wrong with it. He was ready to do the press conference and be a Giant, and then boom, he goes to the Mets. And they must have found nothing wrong with his physical. So I don't know what the heck the Giants were looking for there. But that's an organization. They got to figure out what's going on there. I mean, there's still some good free agents left, but not nearly as good as the ones that are off the market now. But just a swing and a miss for that organization. I feel bad for that fan base. Full on.
Yeah. No, you know what the Giants fan, you know what if being a Giants fan feels like right now with all these moves? It's like getting kicked in the nuts every 30 minutes with a steel-tipped boot for 24 hours. That's what it feels like. Because you're right, they talked a big game, and here's the thing. They may have been. Here's the thing. They're what, third best team in their division now? The Dodgers. I mean, look, the Dodgers. Regardless of how little they spent, they're still a good team. The Padres. If Tatis comes back and he's healthy, my goodness, Tatis, Bogarts, Machado, Soto in the same lineup, that's filthy. Um, so they might be a second place team depending on their pitching. The
I agree.
Diamondbacks have good prospects, so maybe the
And
Diamondbacks.
we saw there was a big trade yesterday. They got that catching prospect for Varsho. That's a good trade, I thought, for the Blue Jays because that helps their lineup and makes them, I guess, harder to the game plan against because he's a good lefty hitter, had 27 homers last year. But that top catching prospect, isn't he like one of the best prospects in the country?
Top 5, top 10 last year, yes.
For all positions?
No, everyone.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so that's a big piece for them as I think they continue to rebuild.
Yeah, no, but I will say this for the Blue Jays. They traded Teoscar Hernandez for a good reliever, but you had a hole at outfield, especially if Springer's injury history is going to force them to push him off center field and more to left or right field or DH. Kind of like he's not as bad. It's not as bad as the Angels have as Rendon, but you had a need for an outfielder who you at the start of the offseason. Then you traded Teoscar Hernandez, so you create a bigger hole. Now you go and get Varsho, that's fine, but you put Lourdes Gurriel, the brother of Yuli Gurriel, in that trade. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. is a good player. So now you traded Teoscar Hernandez and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. That's two major pieces of that lineup that are now on other teams. And then you replaced him with Kevin Kiermaier, who is a great defender at center field, not so great offensively. He's not so good offensively. And Varsho. So again, it is a little perplexing on what the Blue Jays are going to do. But yeah, like that was a good trade. It's going to be interesting. Also, Varsho does have catching experience as well. So if he can, so that is a good option for them. But we're going to end the show on that note. This will be the last show of 2022. For our first show is going to be in a couple of weeks from now. Have a happy holidays and a happy New Year's.
Yes. Hope you all have a great Merry Christmas. If you're in the cold, just please stay inside tonight, and then hope you all have a wonderful New Year's Eve next weekend.
All right.